Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Time's flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello. Throughout the course of our lives, we read, hear, and speak billions of words, and we think we understand the purpose of language. But today, we're going to explore language in a whole new way as something that can not only awaken us to the possibility of multidimensional transmissions, but also reconnect us to the oneness that underlies all of life. Christina Donnell, Ph.D, is a clinical psychologist, a mystic, spiritual teacher, and author who studied Eastern traditions and the shamanic energy practices of the Q'ero Indians of Peru for nearly 3 decades. She's the founding director of Winds of Change Association, a Minneapolis-based educational organization offering programs that support humanity's evolving consciousness, and the author of 2 books, the multi-award-winning Transcendent Dreaming, Transcendent Dreaming, Stepping into Our Human Potential, and Encounters with Living Language, Surrendering to the Power of Words, which chronicles her 92 consciousness expanding encounters with language that she experienced between 1997 and 2015, which were inspired by a message from the invisible world. Christina Donnell, welcome.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for having me today, that we can have tea together. And more importantly, thank you for this forum in our world for those who are voyaging in consciousness. It's very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, your entire life, I think, has been a preparation for the work that you're doing now. I mean, you've had mystical experience since early childhood. At the age of 6, you channeled a book for your first grade class about African American spirituals. That was based on your dreams, sitting on the lap of an African woman who sang to you. You've journeyed to other realities while living in Detroit during the early 60s. At what point of your far from ordinary life journey did you begin to understand that those mystical dreams and the illuminations that you were receiving were your initiation as a seer?
Beautiful question. You know, I think I wrote Transcendent Dreaming in 2008. And it was in my early 30s where my lucid dreaming, which I call transcendent dreaming, it's a little different than lucid dreaming because you are one with the underlying intelligence of the universe, really becoming participatory in the midwifery of the unseen into the seen. And that exploded in my early 30s. I hung on by my fingernails to continue to see clients and do keynotes and do whatever. But it was at that time, because it was so intense, I knew to surrender to the dreaming, to the energy that was behind the dreaming that was unfolding. It'd be like surrendering to God. And that was in my early 30s, the beginning of saying, okay, this is a path forward. In my life, I don't have a choice about it, and I'm going to surrender into it wherever it takes me.
You spent decades learning shamanic energy practices of Q'ero Indians, working with sorcerers and shamans of the high Andes. What attracted you to the Q'ero in particular?
Well, it's interesting. I could say after having met them, all the reasons why I was attracted. But again, it was through a transcended dream. And this is where all of us may have a destiny that is unfolding that we don't know all the pieces of the tapestry and we can't put it together until decades later. But I had a transcendent dream where I was in Heathrow Airport, and 3 men and a woman approached me and said, "Will you take this wooden box back to the United States?" And this is before 9/11 and also before COVID. And I said, "Well, I have to see what is in there, and before I would ever consider it." And when they opened it, it was a mummy, and it was adorned in gold. That meant nothing to me at the time. Um, I said, "Yes, I will take this back to the United States." It was an extraordinary lucid dream, all the way down to the details of which I can remember the woman in the dream and how her arm was over a chair. And long story short, 2 years later, I'm going into the Andes. I meet the Q'ero. They're considered the descendants or the scribes of the Inca, of whom were adorned in gold. And I'm on a 30-year experience with a culture that is dying out, that doesn't live in linear time, doesn't live from a me cosmology. And I was deeply immersed, embedded, while witnessing so many of them dying out. And of course, a destiny unfolded. And the interesting thing in this dream is the woman in the dream is the editor of my first book. And she's also the editor who archived every illumination I had around language. And she's the editor of this book.
Wow.
Ellen Kleiner from Blessing Way.
So why did you go? What did you think you were going to Peru for?
At the time, I was, again, early 30s, Transcendent Dreaming. I was disenchanted with Western medicine and psychotherapy as a clinical psychologist. I felt we were not addressing the soul or the spirit. Everything was about medical necessity, and it was becoming assembly line therapy. And I'm like, I'm leaving the medical center. I'm leaving my position as a assistant professor at the university, and I'm going to travel to other cultures and places where the spirit is enlivened and lived in a different way. And so that was the beginning of the journey. What actually landed me in the Andes was I was a martial artist at the time. And of course, in martial arts, you're always looking at invisible energy, how to work with invisible forces in order to move energy. And I met a chiropractor who said, "You might want to go to this retreat." It was a 3-day workshop. It was Alberto Violdo who had worked with the Q'ero. And I said, okay, I've never gone to a conference other than to be a keynote or a retreat. It's the only retreat that I've ever done in my life, but it was life-changing. And it made me go, I want to go see and experience these people.
Did you stay there, or did you just keep going back and forward?
I kept going back and forth, and I kept studying their actual shamanic teachings. And of course, the more I was immersed in the culture, the more they were showing me their shamanic teachings, all of which, the Q'ero, because of the altitude they live at, it's really monastic. It's above the tree line. When I first started going there, a plastic Ziploc bag was a novelty to them. They thought that was hilarious. They are a people who the energy world is first and the material world is secondary. And they experience everything through the felt sense in the body, not through conceptualized language, even though their language is very close to Sanskrit and the words resonate with the larger continuum of the earth.
This is while you were in the Andes that you had a near-death experience when you got yellow fever, searching for your godson who was lost in the mountains, and you found him dead on a hillside. You should have died then. I mean, you were so sick, you should have died, but you didn't. Tell us what happened.
And I would have liked to have died because I felt so sick at the time. But yes, I am in Incan hut, no running water, and having contracted yellow fever. And 50% of people die if they get the second round, of which I did get, with those high fevers. And so I had what most people would call a near-death experience, where my awareness and consciousness just started floating up, floating up, floating up to a threshold that brings new dimensions. And of course, because of my transcendent dreaming, I'm very, very comfortable there. So I found it intoxicating. I was ready to leave. And in that moment of intoxication, body is on this side, the awareness is wanting to move into the next multidimensional realm. I heard the sound underneath the sound vibrating through my heart and my entire body. I am the living light behind the word. It is now time for you to do what you came here to do. Be the mouthpiece for language. And then I came tumbling back down into my body with the hammering headache associated with yellow fever. And it took me another 6 or 7 days of convalescing even to be able to stand and get on a horse to get out of the altitude and to the airport and back to the United States. And that message meant nothing to me at the time conceptually. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. In hindsight, I'm not surprised, because I've had an obsession with genius poets for many, many, many years, where I just read and absorb a line that transports my consciousness. So I have always had an interest in language. I just didn't understand what that message was from another dimension, really.
So what, I mean, you've said, let me quote something you said, that your experiences of love, grief and beyond, you came to perceive language all around, in and through your body and senses, on the song of the wind, the pages of Rilke, and through deep internal dives into stillness and light that you call illuminations, or privileged moments of expansion and insight. I have been a word person my entire life. Books are my life. I love words. I have never had an experience with words like the ones that you describe in your book. I want some of what you've got. You're going to have to tell us how to get it. But first, tell us what that feels like, having those illuminations, feeling those words in a whole other way. I mean, it's almost beyond anything I can imagine.
Yes. And we will talk about your previous guest, because I listened to her, your interview with her about the new human coming onto the planet. And I do believe they have these capacities. But we who are older, I might be a bridge, but our perceptual filter and the way it is designed, it goes against having an experience with the word. Yet, Sandy, you have had an experience with a word. You have sat with somebody, they have said something, and you have probably had full body chills, I'm guessing. If not that, you've read a great line and you can just feel the hair go up and rise. Yes. So what is it like to have that experience? Can you hear me okay? Because I can't hear you right now. Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, good. What is it like to have that experience? Well, it is one, it requires the deepest receptivity of your inner sanctuary, your inner self, that you are capable of. It requires inhabiting the space in the body, inhabiting the space outside the body, realizing they're connected as a whole. That becomes the inner sanctuary in which receiving any experience, but also language, can invade in that receptivity these internal trap doors where the sensory system has an experience with the archetypal, the unseen forces behind the root of a word. Every word has 1,000 roots that lead back to the silence, which leads to the unboundedness of the oneness underlying the whole. And many spiritual traditions say language will never bring us there. And I think I might be on the planet to say, oh no, that is not true. Language has absolutely brought me here. No spiritual dogma, through an extraordinary receptivity where once you embody the language, experience it in the body, the conceptual mind has to recede. That's the most difficult piece, because we just want to conceptualize, and then the word remains inert. It's not alive. But when the conceptual mind recedes and we deeply receive the experience of the word, like we would experience a lover, direct perception unfolds. The quality and structure of awareness shifts. One has to hang on. It's a roller coaster because you move beyond duality, us and them, conceptualizing, and into the quantum field, which is multidimensional and comes in through direct knowing.
Is it the word or is it the sound?
It's the sound, because words are virtual cups of light, and light is sound.
Yes. I read a book by a guy called David Elkington, who is an archaeologist as well as an author, and he was talking about the origins of the Egyptian writing.
Yes.
He said it's the sound that made the pattern. So if you had an idophone and you had the sound and you put the sound and you get the pattern, and that is how the hieroglyphics were created.
Oh, beautiful.
Does that sound, feasible to you?
Absolutely it does. Because I do mention in the book, because of my mystical nature, I can never remember what I've written and what was in there. So forgive me for not quoting it exactly. But I do mention in the book an experience with an illumination with, I think, an indigenous woman from New Zealand who said, we are the dreaming pattern that sets the water in motion, Christina. That was one of the illuminations I had. We are the dreaming pattern that sets the motion into the manifestation. And you are speaking to that, because sound, if you play a piano and you place sand on top of the piano, as you play, the sand configures into the architectural sound imprint. This is how the unseen comes into the manifest, through sound.
Yeah. So when you have an illumination, is it completely spontaneous? Can you plan it?
Don't I wish I could plan it? I'm a Virgo. I'd like to plan everything. Oh no, they come from outside. They come unexpectedly. They're startling. The only consistent thing I could say is they come when my mind is more quiet. So the conceptual mind is, and I'm a long time meditator. So when my conceptual mind is quiet, it's really quiet. And that seemed to be the soil to which they would arise. But they did come from outside, unexpected, never convenient. And yet every single one of them thwarted my rational or my conceptual mind. I couldn't make meaning. It wasn't available. And then I would have an experience in the body occasioned by these illuminations by language, none of which I understood, because I didn't, from the beginning, didn't know why this was happening, which is why I archived each one after I had them and bulleted, sent them off to my editor, because I'm like, I don't know what this is, but it feels important given the message, my near-death experience. And it wasn't until maybe probably around COVID time, 2020, that I said, there is a governing aim in these messages, because they have consistently been changing the quality and the structure of my awareness without my conceptual mind being able to make meaning.
So what is that? I mean, have you worked out what that quality or purpose is?
I don't even think in those terms any longer. I just take each day. I don't even have any beliefs. I play in beliefs. I'd love to play in beliefs, but I see a belief for simply what it is. But what has occurred as a result of it is the living in linear reality with an us and them duality perspective is like, it's a mother language for all of us, but it is no longer my primary language. My primary language is unity consciousness, non-dual awareness, but not non-dual awareness from the mind, non-dual awareness through a participatory experience with the underlying whole. And the felt sense of that and the shift in the structure of consciousness embodied. And language is what brought this experience. I would say transcendent dreaming too.
Yeah.
But language.
So when you write, writing is a different process.
It is.
It's the mental process.
It's very.
It can be something else as well, but you've got to make it make sense.
You do.
So is that a problem? Is that a dichotomy there?
Well, it's interesting, because I just even recently said to my editor, I'm so thankful not to be writing, because no matter how many calories I would ingest, I kept losing weight writing. Well, why was that happening? Because it wasn't just from my mind. And I felt that in the writing. I felt, what's it? You maybe even interviewed him. Is it Stephen Buhner, who we lost on the planet, who wrote Ensouling Language? He talks about for writers, the duende, the spirit, of absolutely embodying the spirit of where the word wants to move on the page and the narrative. And that is a full body felt experience. And I'm here to say that could be a weight loss program for most, because the entire body is in the writing, not just the mind.
So how and why? I mean, these illuminations, why do you think they are coming to you? And is it something that you're doing, that you're seeking, perhaps unconsciously? Or do you think that they are a gift from a higher authority?
Well, I don't make meaning. I just don't make, I just go, okay, it is, okay, Krishnamurti, it is what it is. And because I probably came in on the planet as a mystical temperament so early on, it's an avenue of the midwifery of the unseen into the seen that I just simply know so well. So is that a destiny? Well, I am 61 years old. Apparently it is a destiny. What does it mean? Well, I do think the collective consciousness is in this place of evolution, just like language is. And there is a crossroads and a threshold that is happening. And the time might be now. And I'm just simply a part of that crossroads and the bridge bringing the new human.
Yeah. One more question before we go to break. You use the word illuminations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel illuminated after each one of these? And is that a progressive thing? Like, I'm more illuminated now because I've had another one. What are you getting from it?
Yes. I would say you absolutely feel illuminated afterwards. And when the conceptual mind, being able to rationalize mind comes back online, there is a grief because it's an exquisite moment of being participatory with that which is larger. At the same time, when the conceptual mind comes back online, I'm like, thank God I have homeostasis in the body again. So and then it can last 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. And then the overhead power lines we live under is duality, linear experience. And I'm always thankful for that too, because in multidimensionality, all dimensions are beautiful. Duality is beautiful. Unity consciousness is beautiful. They're just different dimensions.
I have to say, I mean, I read hundreds of books a year, and as an editor, I read them from several levels with several hats on.
There's I bet you do.
Something in your book that was definitely visceral. I wouldn't say I had an illumination experience, but there was something in your book that really caught my attention because you were trying to convey something and I was grasping the very edges of it, not able to have the experience itself, but to be able to imagine that experience. And that was very powerful.
Oh, beautiful. I appreciate hearing that.
We're going to go to a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest today is clinical psychologist, mystic, spiritual teacher, and author Christina Donnell. And we're talking about her latest book, Encounters with Living Language, Surrendering to the Power of Words. We'll be back with more from Christina Donnell after this break.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS, just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Christine Donnell, you said that you have realized the, quote, unfathomable power of words, unquote, and that a word could conceivably influence the wholeness of creation. Well, of course, if we believe the Bible, it did. But expand on that a little.
Oh, I could go in so many different directions here. So, including, I talk about the Q'ero in ceremony in the high Andes at really high altitude, bringing in the thunder beings, bringing in the lightning bolts into ceremony, not from a place of power, but dominion with. That, of course, in the beginning was the word. In the beginning was the word. In the beginning was a cosmic explosion. The word, sound. So these forces of which we are participatory and embedded in at a quantum level that we often don't understand our connectedness to, we have the ability to be connected to. And the power of that connection can bring transformation. So that's one direction I would have gone. I would also say, remember Gandhi. 400 million Indians seeking sovereignty, from the UK. And when he would sit in prayer, the fighting would stop. So that prayer is language that moves back into the silence, that has the power to have an impact in the invisible world. And then I would cite Maharishi, who speaks about the Vedic word, and that, yes, you have the meaning of the word, but then there's the experience of the word, and it's only the experience of the word that can bring you to the unboundedless. And when you come to the unboundedless, it's more connected, it's more connected, it's more connected. The word is no longer inert. Now it is alive.
Do you feel that words have lost their sacredness?
Yes, I do, Sandy, I do. I feel this book has come out at a time where there is a degradation in language. And I don't know what that means, because I just have to do what I have to do. Yeah. But I do feel it's not, I'm not even going to say it's a small tributary. I'm saying it's a salmon pushing upstream to spawn. Maybe it's before its time, but it's not, because this is how things evolve. The soil is cultivated, and we're all just a piece of cultivating the soil.
It's so interesting how the meanings that we hang on certain words change over times, where suddenly take a word like wicked, which had a particular meaning to many of us, and yet to many teenagers, wicked is wow, it's good.
Oh, right.
And the words evolve, and I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but we do see that words get loaded. And I'm very aware when I read media reports about certain incidents or people, I am very aware that a journalist is choosing certain words in order to turn the reader against that person.
Yeah, I call that weaponizing language.
Yes.
Weaponizing language.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you said that ultimately the power of any word depends on the mindset of the person using it and the depth of interconnected embodied awareness from
Yes.
which it arises. In NLP, we understand that the only meaning a communication has is the interpretation that the other person puts on it. And that is because they are coming from their own experience.
Exactly.
How do you reconcile that?
I reconcile that in this way. You know, I have taught for many years, and I feel complete in teaching because I don't really have a belief system I want to teach out of. And yet, I do not feel complete in sitting with souls. And and I think the reason why is because I can sit in their perceptual filter in how they're making meaning of life and just expand it and get it to breathe. And what I know is this in my practice of, so I've seen thousands, you've read thousands and thousands of books. I have sat with thousands and thousands of souls. I love sitting with souls. And I love being in their meaning making because I can just help it breathe for transformation, health, well-being, whatever it is they're coming in for. But here's the most important part. As I sit and I deeply receive, my conceptual mind doesn't make meaning. I allow in my sensory system and the interior trap doors and the cellular nature of my body for these words to come in and be alive. The forces enter the room. And when the forces enter the room, the client, even in their own belief and perceptual filter, can't help but experience that movement in the room. And that is the opening for their own awareness for whatever it is that needs to happen at that time. And I think the book talks about that in a couple of places with clients. This is the power, the holy power of the word when we just don't conceptualize it or think of it as representation. I question, have we failed language? It's in its own evolution. It has so much more to offer us right now. And of course, I'm sitting here as the mouthpiece for that.
Yeah, you've said that a new world is quietly emerging, reconnecting human consciousness to the whole of life. And we've just touched upon the transcendent human and the kids, which is really important.
It is.
Because so many of these children do not speak.
Yes.
That doesn't mean they cannot communicate. I mean, we see this with the alphabet boards, but I've also seen, been very close to witnessing a child who can communicate telepathically.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes. And I do think that these children are showing us something really important about everything, but also about language as well. And I know that you think that too.
I see your wink, and as you spoke, I have full body chills. So that is me receiving the word.
Yeah.
And yes, I do believe that. I
Yeah.
absolutely do believe that. Again, in the book, I talk about younger clients and their perceptions that unfold. But more importantly here for the interview, when I wrote this book, I didn't expect to have the outpouring I've had from parents and young adults on the spectrum. And I've had two really, one of where we're now a pen pal, a 15-year-old and a 24-year-old beautiful East Indian man, both of whom said to me, they're not speakers, but through letterboarding, they can now write, right? They have all these extraordinary abilities. They are telepathic. They know 3 or 4 languages that their parents never taught them. They were never experienced. So they're living in a multidimensional awareness, right?
Yep.
But what they said was, Christina, you get us. You get us. We soar and we fall. And our consciousness is in past and future,
Yes.
all in the moment.
Yes.
And thank you for writing this book, of which absolutely floored me. And it didn't, because I really do feel we have new humans coming onto the planet. I spoke about in Living Language the young gymnast that had a closed head injury and needed to leave and was in the grief of leaving her, Olympic hopeful gymnast. And at our last session, when I said, because of a closed head injury, do you feel ready to go back to college? She said to me, Christina, I have to tell you something really weird. You're going to think I'm crazy. She said, I don't even study. I take a multiple whatever test, and multiple answer test. And I just listen to the sound of each of the options. And the one that is most resonant with the question is the truth. And I said, well, what do you do when you have to do it like a writing? And she's go, oh, it's the same. Like the question, I just write that I can feel the sound underneath that is connected to the question. And she said, I know that sounds really weird. And I said, well, is it like a sound underneath sound? And her eyes widened and she goes, oh my God, it is.
Yes.
Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm crazy? And I'm like, oh, I think you're going to do just fine in the world.
Yeah. And, some of this gets dismissed as synesthesia.
Oh, yes.
But when we look at this population, more than any other, they have so many sensory issues that are considered to be, anomalies, but actually are incredible gifts.
I agree. And they're only anomalies because we live in a really noisy, coarse, rough world where the sensory experience that leaves you naked, vulnerable, and exposed does not fare well in the soil we are living in now. But guess what? Evolution and mutation go hand in hand. It's not adaptive initially. It's not adaptive. And we see that. There's a, how do you take somebody who's living in a unity consciousness, soaring and falling? My 15-year-old, who's my pen pal, says, Christina, I'm on the planet to rattle others who are in my presence. That is who I am.
Yes.
That's like us saying, well, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist, or I'm going to be a teacher, or I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be that. No, this is who I am in the world, 15 years old.
Yeah. Mm. So do you think that, I remember reading a book some years ago, and it was posited in this book that before we had language, we communicated telepathically. And then we began to develop language, and then we developed the hemispheres in the brain, and suddenly everything gets separate. Do you think that these new generations of the new humans, we will go back to communicating telepathically and forget language?
Yes, my editor often talks about, yes, you are here for the post-literate society. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I'm in language and words, but I do get it. I love the mystery. I love the unfolding. We never know what direction it's going to take. I like to sit with any direction it might take. What I do feel, if I have to make believe here, is that Homo erectus, limbic brain, primal, instinctual, sensory system, all turned on in the body, no language, Absolutely, it was telepathic. It's the only way to move in the world, not die, survival. Highly honed. And then evolution, we got the hemispheres, we got our precognitive functioning, language came in, and this has been language, precognitive, executive functioning has been really dominant at the expense of this other extraordinary designed system. And then our consciousness too has gone in this direction of us and them, conceptualize, quick soundbite, boom, move on. That doesn't allow the sensory system its full engagement. So I think the new human may have dendritic fields where these are now coming together and incorporating. That's my thought. Perhaps it's my wish for humanity, because this us and them, and even the news, always putting forth a perceptual filter of us and them, it really has to die. It is dying. It is not life sustaining. It doesn't understand the whole. And yet we don't know. We don't know what direction we're going.
I want to talk about transcendent dreaming a little bit. You had a radical spiritual awakening through this form of dreaming. Tell me more about it and how we can experience that for ourselves.
It'd be easier to talk about having an experience with a word than with transcendent dreaming, because I had major publishers who wanted a how-to for transcendent dreaming, and even with an agent who was very upset with me because I said, she was like, Christina, how could you not entertain a how-to? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't understand how it works. And I've been a teacher for 30 years, but I don't know how to teach this. It's a gift that is a way of consciousness where transcendent dreaming, you awake within a dream, and it goes beyond lucid dreaming, where you're the witness and you can control the dream. You can't control the dream. You are one with the dream, and you become one and participatory with the oneness under creation. And so in those dreams, they actually manifest in the physical world because of that place. I don't know how to teach that.
Would you?
But I do think it's part of our human potential for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that, sometimes we have dreams where all our senses seem to be engaged? And, I've had a dream where my departed dog, I could feel myself stroking his fur. It was as real could be. Would you call that a transcendent dream?
I would.
Yeah.
I would, because you're in the felt experience and you're participatory within it, and you're awake within your dream.
Yeah.
That would be the definition of a transcendent dream. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Okay. You say that extraordinary experiences with language have led you to a destiny of incarnating the eternal in temporal time. That stood out for me because I'm trying to work out what that means. What it means.
Yeah, what state was I in when I wrote that, right? But I believe it to be true. I believe the eternal is nothing other than quantum reality. And right now, because we live in a linear duality consciousness, it doesn't allow for the quantum reality where there's entanglement and participatory and awareness of where it's all connected. And they are just different realities, different dimensions. And Sandy, I've always said, wow, quantum physics has been here for, I don't know, 100 years, and we have not made a dent in the consciousness that resides within us. At the end of the day, are we living in a linear dual world and we've embodied it? Yes. But guess what? We are embedded in a part of the quantum soup, which every cell of our body is made of that too. And why has that not awakened, or is it slow to awaken? This book is a part of that awakening, because it's just another language. And it absolutely will rock and shift how you move in the world. So yes, it requires endeavoring, voyaging in consciousness, endeavoring, giving up an old, learning a new language.
You have written about dream states and the dreams that you've had, which then have manifested in the world. Do you think that you are having a predictive dream, or do you think you are dreaming something into being?
Wow, no one has ever asked me that question. In Transcendent Dreaming, I have an experience with a client where I know she's in harm's way, and I have a prophetic awareness through a dream that she could be killed. And I'm young, I'm in my 30s, and I'm still in a place of doing versus being. And I alert her to this dream, of which thwarts her from going to Chicago. And then the next 10 years ensue, and she, as a nurse, gets addicted to heroin and goes into prostitution, and eventually dies from violence that goes with prostitution. And it made me say, wow, that Transcendent Dream showed me a possibility that was going to unfold in the manifest world. And I acted. I acted by saying, I just have to see this deep. But then I also feel as though I saw, had I not acted, maybe she would have died in that alley, and she wouldn't have suffered the next 10 years of which I sat and witnessed. And so in Transcendent Dreaming, and as a midwife of the unseen and the seen, it's why I'm like, I don't have beliefs, I don't want to do, I just want to be. It's coming through me for a reason, but I don't need to have an action in the world, because I don't want to influence that action, because that action can go in so many different directions, and that is not mine to determine. And so I've really, it's taken me over half a decade to say, I am just in my beingness. Whatever's going to come through me, the universe wants it to come through. So it's a part of the manifestation, but I will not act on it. I will not talk about it. I will just simply allow it to be in the flow of the universe.
Christina, unfortunately, we're out of time pretty much. I am very acutely aware that we have been trying to talk about something that really, the words don't do it.
They don't
do it. So what I will say to our viewers is read the book. I'd be very interested to see what kind of reaction people have from reading the book. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sandy, thank you for your beautiful, actually illuminating questions. They are some of the best questions I've encountered for a long time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's it for today. The Encounters with Living Language, Surrendering to the Power of Words, and Transcendent Dreaming, Stepping into Our Human Potential are published by Winds of Change Books. And for more information about Christina Donnell's work, her books, her courses, and the Winds of Change Association, visit christinadonnell.com. That's it for this week. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back with another edition of What is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Christina Donnell.
Thank you, Sandy.